welcome to St Martin's Church in Allerton Mauleverer here in North Yorkshire. The church here is built in the Gothic neo-Norman style in 1745, replacing the already existing Norman church that was built here in the 12th century by the Mauleverer family. And when we go inside, we'll see there's some tombs and effigies of members of the Mauleverer family who fought at the Battle of Bannockburn and in the English Civil War. So we're going to go inside the now derelict church, which is maintained by the Church's Conservation Trust, and we'll have a look at the effigies and the architecture inside itself. My name is Chris, this is Church Searcher, and I'll see you after the map. So the Mauleverers were a French Norman family who owned the land around here, originally from a little village called Mauleverer near Rouen in France. And the name actually means bad, mal, maul, or poor harrier, which was a type of hunting dog you'd use for hunting rabbits. But the family crest has got 3 of those harrier dogs on it. So the Allerton, in the place name of Allerton Mauleverer, refers to Elfwild's Ton, a farm or a settlement belonging to Elfwild. And then the Mauleverer was added to that when the family here became the subtenants of the estate in the 12th century. There was a claim that they actually came over with William the Conqueror in 1066, and they could trace their roots all the way back to then. But it was later disproven, I think around the 15th or 16th century, that there'd been a kind of falsified family tree. But we know they were here 1105, and this has been the family seat for 700 years or so since then. And they moved up the social rankings through marriage and buying other estates, and eventually became quite an important family. Now, they built a church here in the 12th century, but this was built to replace it by Richard Arundell, who was a descendant of the Mauleverer family through his mother, who was a widow of Richard Mauleverer, who was the last in the Mauleverer line. He passed away in 1693. So the church here was built on the site of the original church in 1745, the Georgian period, in this Gothic neo-Norman style. And at the time, very fashionable to sort of build these churches in the landscape of the estate, so it could be viewed from the house when they were out hunting amongst the trees and the hills. That they were all designed to create a particular look and feel to the landscape. So the house here is just across the way. It's called Allerton Castle, also built by Richard Arundell originally. It's gone through many redesigns over the years. Its current form is kind of Jacobean. It's quite a spectacular interior. It's now like a wedding and events venue. So the stones on this wall here are all limestone, but the front west side is actually ashlar. So we'll go in through there into the nave of the church itself. So one of the first things you see as you come in is the Hammerbeam ceiling. Hammer beams are a feature of early Gothic churches, so it's been revived here for this homage to the Gothic, and essentially it's using smaller sections of wood to cross a larger expanse. So the smaller short beams by the side there are the hammer beams itself. They're supported by a hammer brace, and they go up to the curved collar base, which then supports the rafters above. Now we've also got a very simple but very elegant font, which almost looks like a chess piece. And we've got these beautiful light fittings with ironwork. So this being an estate church, you would have had all the estate workers, the staff from the house and their families coming to worship in the church here on a Sunday. We've got Georgian pews on either side, and then the main family from the house would have been up in these box pews at the front, listening to the preacher. You can see the pulpit has got two levels here, and above the upper stage there's this sounding board which would reflect the voice of the preacher back out to the congregation here in this large church. And it was around this time there was much more emphasis on the written word of the Bible, so this sort of thing was quite important. Now, linking to the written word of the Bible, we've got at the front the Lord's Prayer with two cheeky cherubs depicted up above. There's also the Nicene Creed to the right of the church, but then right up above we've got this beautiful painting of Moses and Aaron there in his priestly robes, bejeweled breastplate. But if you look carefully at Moses, you'll notice he's got these two kind of flaming horns coming out of his temples. And this stems from a mistranslation of the Bible by St. Jerome in 382 AD, when he was commissioned by the Pope of the time to translate the Bible into Latin, so-called Latin Vulgate. And this is based on a line in Exodus, Exodus 34, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the two tablets of the covenant of the law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. This word radiant is the key to the mistranslation which occurred. Now, in the original Hebrew, the word for radiant or shining was haran, but very similar to heden, the word for horned. And in the original Hebrew text, vowels weren't represented, so you just had the consonants, so it could be interpreted either way. And as a result, in medieval art, you often see Moses depicted with a pair of horns. So the depiction here is kind of an amalgamation of both the shiny, radiant face, but also this idea of Moses being horned. And you can also see that image in the stained glass here above the end altar, which also features depictions of both the west and the east faces of the church here. Now, it's off in the side chapel where we have the effigies of the Mauleverer Knights, and they were transposed to this church from the original church, the Norman church, which once stood on this site. So we have several monuments here to members of the Mauleverer family. We've got the empty stone coffin on the far side there. These two wooden effigies, which are from the late 13th and early 14th century. We've got the stone and brass memorial slab here, which is from the late 13th century. And we've also got these alabaster effigies, which are from the time of the Wars of the Roses. So with the knights here, their armour is representative of armour from the 13th, 14th centuries. You've got the hauberk, which is chainmail, and you can see the mail coif around the head there, a chainmail hood to protect the head. You would wear a gambeson, thick padded jacket over the chainmail, but then help spread the weight with a belt around the midriff, and you can see the belt there. Also a suggestion of the hand there holding the strap for the shield. Now, the larger of the two knights doesn't have a shield, he's got his hands in prayer. There's also a suggestion of a helmet at the top end, with some quite noble faces. Usually you'd have a lion at the feet to symbolise the resurrection. Now, we know around the time that these effigies were made, 1314, there was a John Mauleverer who fought at the Battle of Bannockburn, fighting for the English, King Edward II, against the Scots, Robert the Bruce. And the Battle of Bannockburn was a massive victory for Scotland, completely turned the tide of the War of Independence. And it was just a few years before the Battle of Byland in 1322, fought not far from here. And we explored that in another video up here somewhere. Now there's another Mauleverer, Halnaf Mauleverer, from around this time, who represented Yorkshire at Parliament, being the landowner between 1420 and 1422. And he actually escorted King Henry IV's daughter, Philippa, to Denmark for marriage to the Danish king. So here we've got a memorial brass of another Sir John Mauleverer and his wife Eleanor. He was born in 1342, died in 1400, and you can see he's clad in an evolution of armour from the wooden effigies. He's got a bassinet helmet with a visor swung upwards so you can see his face, with mail underneath, plate armour down the body and the legs, sword and dagger by his side, but you can see the three hounds there on his breastplate, which is the emblem of the Mauleverer family. And they've also got dogs and hounds at their feet. Now we do have an inscription at the bottom here in Latin. Hic jacent Jones Mauleverer miles Eleonora consors eius filia dini Petri de Middleton militis qui Johes obit. Anno MCCC 1400, so 1400. Qua ab piciet dis. Amen. Now Sir John fought for King Richard II in the border wars with Scotland in the 1380s. 1385 in particular, there was a big raid up into Scotland in response to a lot of the border raids that were coming south from Scotland itself, and also the arrival of the French armies in Scotland. It was around that time you had the Old Alliance between Scotland and France, whereby the Scots would send troops over to France to help fight the English during the 100 Years' War, and in vice versa, the French would send troops to fight with the Scots against the English in Scotland. So in 1385 there was a big raid up into Scotland which went all the way up to Edinburgh, wherein they burnt the abbeys at Melrose and Musselburgh and Dryburgh, and they even torched Edinburgh completely. But as usual, the Scots followed their normal practice of retreating up into the hills and the mountains, refusing to engage the English, at which point eventually the English had to retreat back into England because they were low on provisions. There was another battle skirmish, 1388, the Battle of Otterburn as well. So Sir John here was involved during that ongoing time of to and forth between the Scots and the English in the borderlands. So here we've got another Sir John Mauleverer with his wife Alison, and he died in 1475, and he's wearing armour which is much more reminiscent of the Wars of the Roses in which he fought. Breastplate here, plate armour down his legs, dagger here, sword down the side, and around his chin here you've got what's called a bevel, and this is armour that would protect the neck and chin. And essentially you'd wear that with a helmet without a visor. It would offer protection for the face in that way. And you can see his hair cascading down here, and there's also completely different fashion with Alison here by his side. So Sir John here was a retainer of the Percy family during the Wars of the Roses, so he was on the Lancastrian side. And he actually fought at the Battle of Wakefield in 1460, which you can see the video we did on that up here. A few months after that he fought at the Battle of Towton in 1461, not far from here, and it's at that battle that Percy was actually killed. And if you fast forward a few years to 1465, Sir John was then in the service of John Neville, who was a Yorkist. So obviously, in order to survive, Sir John here was actually having to go wherever the political winds blew him at the time. So Sir John here is thought to be either the son or grandson of the other Sir John Mauleverer, who's depicted on the brass plaque behind there. And together with Allerton, they had 7 children, 2 of which, Halnath and Thomas, fought for the ill-fated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, which brought to the end the whole of the Wars of the Roses. Now up above here you can see the family crest of the Mauleverer family. It's got the 3 Harrier hounds on there, as represented by the family name, and you can also see the red hand, which symbolises the baronet which belonged to the family here. Now there was another member of the Mauleverer family not represented here, and that was Sir Thomas Mauleverer, who fought in the English Civil War on the parliamentarian side. And ironically, he had just been knighted by King Charles I before the war broke out, for which he actually had to pay for the privilege. But when the Long Parliament was called, he was elected as an MP for this area for Boroughbridge, which is just up the road from here. And when war broke out, he sided with Parliament and raised a regiment of foot and a troop of horse, paid for from his own pocket. Now, ironically, these soldiers fighting under his banner became notorious for pillaging and completely trashing churches during the conflict. And Sir Thomas Mauleverer was one of the signatories on the death warrant for King Charles I. Now, he actually died just before the restoration of the monarchy. So when all those people who had signed the death warrant of King Charles I ended up getting executed, he actually missed out on that. Now, his son Richard actually fought on the royalist side during the English Civil War. So when the restoration of the throne happened, he actually prospered quite nicely. But he was the last in the male line of the Mauleverer family here on the estate at Allerton Mauleverer, after which it passed to the Arundell family. On the opposite side to the Mauleverer tombs is another little chapel which has the coat of arms of the Arundell family. And after the Arundells, the house here went through many other iterations and owners, and there's a huge catacomb behind me here which is dedicated to Mrs. Mary Thornton, and she lived at the house here when it was renamed Thorneville Royal. It says, "No doubt this catacomb contains the remains of Mrs. Mary Thornton, the most generous of mothers, the most dutiful and affectionate of wives. Her abilities, vivacity and sound sense were the admiration of all that knew her, and which she retained till the age of 84, 26th of October 1800. So subsequent to that, the house at Allerton Castle was requisitioned during the war effort, the Second World War, by 6th Bomber Group, which was the Canadian bomber squadrons which were based here in the Vale of York, and they used it as their headquarters. And you can see there's a plaque that's been left here in recognition and gratitude for the use of the church here for their worship. So on the plaque there you can see their crest, then the motto in Latin, per ardua ad astra, per ardua, through adversity, ad astra, to the stars. And that is the motto of the British Air Force and all the Commonwealth Air Forces as well, including Canada. So St Martin's here in Allerton Mauleverer is another little hidden gem in North Yorkshire, maintained by the church's Conservation Trust. So if you'd like to leave a donation to help them in their work, I'll leave the link down below. But until next time, I hope to see you in the next video. Keep church searching.